Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when Ricky Gervais walks onto the View set and the topic is death? The audience buzzes with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Ricky, in his casual blazer and signature smirk, takes his seat, exuding that calm confidence that can make anyone laugh or cringe in the same breath. Sunny Hostin wastes no time. "Ricky, let me guess, you're here to make jokes about death again?" she quips, a sly grin tugging at her lips. The audience chuckles, some nervously. Ricky's smile doesn't falter. "I promise," he says, "there's a method to my madness. Death is serious, but we can't pretend we don't talk about it every day." The banter starts light, but tension creeps in as Ricky shares a personal story about losing a close friend, describing the strange solace he found in public memorials and shared grieving. Sunny leans in, eyebrows raised, challenging the notion that grief should ever be on display. The audience shifts in their seats. Some nod in agreement with Sunny's insistence on privacy. Others whisper and laugh at Ricky's darkly humorous observations. Then, in a moment that silences the studio, Ricky leans forward, eyes intense, voice steady but cutting through the tension. "You think privacy protects us from grief, but sometimes it's public acknowledgement that saves us." Gasps ripple through the audience. Sunny's jaw tightens, and the air feels electric. Everyone watching at home is left asking themselves, what will happen when private pain collides with public debate?
The cameras cut from the opening clip to the full panel. The studio still buzzing from Ricky's intense opening line. The audience murmurs, half leaning forward, half chuckling nervously. Ricky sits back in his chair, fingers steepled, exuding that casual air of someone who knows exactly where the conversation is headed. Sunny Hostin leans forward across the table, arms crossed, her eyes sharp. "So, Ricky, you're saying grief is better when everyone can see it? That somehow airing your pain publicly is healthier?" Ricky smirks, tilting his head. "Not always, Sunny. But there's something in collective experience, seeing others share their sorrow, their memories. It reminds you you're not alone, and sometimes that's exactly what people need." Joy Bihar, sitting beside Sunny, chimes in, half teasing, half serious. "Oh, I'm sure some folks just like the attention." The audience laughs, some nervously, while Ricky chuckles softly, not missing a beat. Attention, sure. But mostly connection. That's the key word, connection. Sunny shakes her head, leaning back in her chair. "Ricky, people should have the right to process grief privately. There's dignity in solitude, in quiet reflection. We don't need social media memorials or viral funeral posts to tell us how to mourn." Ricky leans forward, elbows on the table, voice calm but firm. "I get that. I do. But I've seen families who didn't talk, who didn't share, and people just got lost in their own pain. Then you see someone else openly grieving, and it gives permission to feel, to remember, to heal. That's why I say there's room for both. But ignoring the public side, you risk isolation." Sarah Haynes jumps in, trying to lighten the tension. "But isn't there a danger of oversharing, Ricky, turning mourning into a performance?" Ricky nods slightly, acknowledging the point. "Absolutely, Sarah. That's why balance matters. But think about the elderly, or anyone who feels invisible in society. Public acknowledgement, even something small, can make them feel seen. That's not performance, it's validation." The audience murmurs, some nodding, some whispering in disagreement. A few clap lightly, others lean forward, rapt. The energy in the studio is shifting, subtle but unmistakable. This is no longer casual banter. It's a battle of philosophy, and the stakes feel unexpectedly personal. Sunny leans closer, her voice sharper now. So, Ricky, you're saying grief is better when everyone can see it? That somehow airing your pain publicly is healthier? Ricky meets her gaze evenly, his tone measured but firm. I get that. I do. But I've seen families who didn't talk, who didn't share, and people just got lost in their own pain. Then you see someone else openly grieving, and it gives permission to feel, to remember, to heal. That's why I say there's room for both. But ignoring the public side, you risk isolation. Sarah Haynes jumps in, trying to lighten the tension. But isn't there a danger of oversharing, Ricky? Turning mourning into a performance? Ricky nods slightly, acknowledging the point. Absolutely, Sarah. That's why balance matters. But think about the elderly, or anyone who feels invisible in society. Public acknowledgement, even something small, can make them feel seen. That's not performance, it's validation. The audience murmurs, some nodding, some whispering in disagreement. A few clap lightly, others lean forward, rapt. The energy in the studio is shifting, subtle but unmistakable. This is no longer casual banter. It's a battle of philosophy, and the stakes feel unexpectedly personal. Sunny leans closer, her voice sharper now. So, Ricky, you talk about connection, but isn't there a risk of trivializing grief, making someone's loss a spectacle for strangers to comment on? Ricky meets her gaze evenly, his tone measured but firm. I'm not saying grief should be public for everyone, but I've met people who were afraid to mourn openly, afraid their pain would be judged. And I've also met those who found strength when their memories were shared, their loved ones celebrated. That strength isn't trivial, it's life-saving. Joy interjects again, playful but probing. So what, Ricky? You want to start a viral movement for mourning? People lining up to cry on camera? The audience chuckles, a few whistle in amusement. Ricky laughs, shaking his head. No. I want people to remember that grief doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's part of life. And sometimes it's public. Sometimes it's private. But both matter. Sunny's eyes flash, a mix of skepticism and intensity. And yet, the pressure to make grief public is growing. Social media, hashtags, viral posts, it forces people to perform their emotions rather than process them. Ricky nods slowly, leaning back this time, hands resting on the table. I agree. That's the danger. But the alternative, ignoring grief, hiding it, can be far worse. We need to talk about death, openly, honestly, and some of that will naturally become public. You can't avoid that. The audience starts reacting more audibly now. Some cheer for Sunny's sharp logic, applauding her insistence on personal dignity. Others nod emphatically at Ricky's heartfelt defense, murmuring about the truth in his words. Gasps and quiet laughter punctuate the conversation every few seconds. The tension is tangible, like a taut wire stretched across the studio. Whoopi leans forward, hands clasped. This is fascinating. We're talking about mortality, yes, but also the culture around it. And people at home, they're watching, thinking about their own families, their own losses. That's the beauty and danger of this conversation. Ricky glances around the table, eyes locking briefly with Sunny. Exactly. And it's personal for me, too. I lost a friend last year, someone very close. And watching the way people shared their memories online, publicly, it didn't cheapen my grief. It helped me honor it. That's what I mean when I say public mourning has value. Sunny softens slightly, but remains firm. I hear you, Ricky. I really do. But the potential for exploitation, for people to feel pressured, it's real. And that can't be ignored. The tension hums through the studio. The camera pans the audience, some leaning forward, mouth slightly open, some nodding in agreement, some whispering to each other, clearly caught between Ricky's candidness and Sunny's sharp critique. The room is alive, charged. Ricky smiles faintly, almost wryly. That's why this debate matters. No one approach fits everyone. Death, grief, it's messy, it's human. And whether private or public, it's about understanding, not judgment. The audience erupts into scattered applause. A few viewers whistle, some nod silently, deeply affected. The camera lingers on Sunny, clearly weighing her next words carefully, while Ricky reclines slightly, confident but attentive. The sparks on stage are undeniable. Both are standing their ground. The conversation is still polite, technically, but the tension, the stakes, the raw emotion, they're all simmering just beneath the surface. And everyone knows this isn't over yet.
The camera cuts back after a brief commercial, and the studio is electric. The audience settles, murmuring excitedly. Everyone knows the tension between Ricky Gervais and Sunny Hostin is far from over. Ricky leans forward slightly, hands clasped, his gaze steady. Sunny meets him head-on, her posture rigid, eyes flashing with conviction. You keep talking about public grieving like it's some kind of cure-all. But what about those who just want to mourn quietly? Not everyone wants their pain broadcast for the world to comment on. Isn't there a risk you're romanticizing this idea of collective mourning? Ricky tilts his head, smirking faintly, but his eyes are serious. Romanticized? Maybe. But I've seen it work. Ordinary people, not celebrities, whose lives were shattered by loss. When communities, even online communities, acknowledged that grief, it gave them a path forward. You can call it romanticizing. I call it noticing humanity. Joy Behar chuckles, leaning back in her chair. Oh, Ricky, always turning dark things into a life lesson. The audience laughs, but Ricky ignores the jab, focusing on Sunny. Sunny leans in, voice rising slightly. It's not just about attention, Ricky. There's a subtle pressure now. Social media, public memorials, it can force people into sharing whether they want to or not. Some people feel guilty if they grieve privately, like they're failing socially. Ricky's expression softens, and for a moment the humor drops from his voice. I get that, and I've felt it myself. But think about the opposite. Families too afraid to talk, communities too reserved to mourn. That silence can hurt more than public exposure. When my mentor passed, seeing tributes, hearing stories from people he touched, it didn't exploit him. It honored him. That's the difference. Sunny's jaw tightens, but she nods slightly, acknowledging his point. I understand your example, Ricky, I really do. But isn't there a fine line? One person's comfort can be another's intrusion. Public grief isn't universally healing. Ricky leans back, tapping his fingers lightly on the table. Exactly. That's why there's no one-size-fits-all answer. But what I'm arguing is that people shouldn't automatically fear public expression. It can coexist with private mourning. Balance is key. Joy jumps in again, grinning. Balance? That sounds like your typical celebrity soundbite. The audience laughs. Ricky smirks, raising an eyebrow. Maybe. But it's grounded in experience, not publicity. I've seen it in hospitals, in hospice centers, in small towns. People openly sharing grief, not for attention, but for connection. That connection saved some of them. Sunny's voice sharpens. And yet, Ricky, how do you ensure it doesn't become performative? How do you prevent social pressure from turning authentic grief into a spectacle? Ricky's eyes flash, and for a moment the room goes quieter, the audience leaning forward. You can't control everything. You can't police mourning. But what you can do is provide examples where public acknowledgement has been respectful and meaningful. That's why talking about death publicly matters. It normalizes it without forcing anyone. The audience reacts, divided. Some clap, nodding at Ricky's heartfelt reasoning. Others whisper, clearly siding with Sunny's caution about privacy. A few even cheered aloud at the back. The studio hums with tension and curiosity. Sunny gestures, pointing gently but firmly. Ricky, it's not that I don't see your point,
But when public grief becomes performative, or when it's demanded by culture or society, the very dignity you praise is undermined. People need space to mourn on their terms, without scrutiny. Ricky nods slowly, leaning in, his voice calm but resonant. I hear that, and I agree. But imagine someone who's isolated, feeling invisible. A public act of remembrance can validate their pain, remind them they matter. That's not performance, that's humanity. And that's why death shouldn't always be hidden away. The camera pans to Whoopi Goldberg, who adds softly, "This is the kind of debate that hits home for so many viewers. We're talking about mortality, grief, and connection, and it's hitting everyone differently. That's why it matters." Ricky's gaze moves to the audience briefly, scanning faces, seeing nods, murmurs, and thoughtful expressions. Exactly. Grief is messy, public or private, and society's job isn't to dictate how we feel. It's to provide room for both. Sunny leans back, visibly calculating her next move, but her tone softens slightly. Maybe, Ricky, but I still believe the default should be privacy. We can honor the dead without displaying our pain to the world. Ricky tilts his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. And I'm not saying otherwise. I'm just saying, don't underestimate the power of shared remembrance. That's all. Sometimes being seen in your grief doesn't weaken you. It strengthens you. The audience reacts again. Applause, murmurs, laughter at a well-timed Ricky quip. The tension is still thick, but now it's layered. Curiosity, disagreement, and unexpected empathy. The energy in the studio rises, building toward what everyone can sense will be a deeply personal and emotional moment coming next. Ricky and Sunny lock eyes again, both aware this conversation is about more than abstract philosophy. It's about life, loss, and the human need for connection. The sparks are no longer just on stage, they're palpable across the entire studio.
The studio falls quieter as the discussion deepens. Ricky leans forward, hands resting on the table, his voice steady but layered with emotion. "Sunny, can I finish for a moment? I feel like I'm being interrupted before I even get to the heart of it." Sunny straightens, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, but she nods reluctantly. The audience leans in, sensing the tension crackling in the air. Ricky takes a breath, eyes glinting with intensity. "I've spent a lot of time visiting hospice centers and rural communities, seeing people at the end of their lives. Families, friends, neighbors, people sharing stories, memories, grief. Not for attention, not for social media likes, but to honor the lives of those who passed. Those moments, they're the heartbeat of our society." The room goes still. The audience sits forward, some whispering, some holding their breath. Sunny's expression tightens, her fingers drumming lightly on the table. "But Ricky," she responds softly, "not everyone needs that. People can find purpose and connection without fields, without crowds, without a public stage. City seniors volunteer, build communities. They find meaning in their own ways." Ricky nods, acknowledging her point, but his voice rises slightly with restrained passion. "I know that. I've seen it. But what I'm saying is, sometimes public acknowledgement gives dignity back to people who might feel invisible otherwise. I remember my mentor's last days. He wanted peace, sure, but also recognition for a life well lived. Watching people share their grief, their love, their memories, it didn't cheapen anything. It made those days meaningful." Sunny falls silent for the first time. The studio audience, sensing the shift, grows still too. A few soft murmurs ripple through the room, the weight of Ricky's words hanging in the air. Ricky's voice trembles slightly, not from anger, but from the raw emotion of memory. He loved sunsets, loved quiet walks, and he found people who cared, people who shared his grief. Not crowds that forgot, not a society that ignored him. That's what I mean when I say public mourning has value. It can heal, not exploit. Joy Behar, sensing the intensity, leans forward quietly. Ricky, that's powerful. The audience murmurs agreement, some wiping away tears discreetly. Sunny exhales slowly, her voice softer, but still firm. I understand your point, Ricky. I really do. But the danger is always there. The line between honoring someone and performing their grief publicly is thin. It can feel invasive. Ricky meets her gaze, his own eyes glinting with a mix of vulnerability and resolve. I agree, Sunny. That line exists, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about death, or that we shouldn't allow people the choice to mourn openly if it helps them heal. And sometimes it's the difference between feeling alone and feeling seen. The audience reacts audibly now. Gasps, soft applause, murmurs of agreement. Some lean forward, visibly moved. A few nod slowly, processing the tension between public acknowledgement and private grief. The camera pans over their faces, capturing a mix of emotion, empathy, reflection, even astonishment at the candor on stage. Whoopi Goldberg leans in, voice low but deliberate. I think what's striking here is that we're seeing both sides, clearly and painfully. There's no winner in grief. It's human, messy, and deeply personal. And the courage to speak about it, that's rare. Ricky glances around the table, then back at Sunny. I respect your perspective, Sunny, and I respect that not everyone wants their grief shared. But I've seen firsthand the power of community, the healing and acknowledgement, and I can't ignore that. That's why I speak about it. Sunny's eyes soften, a hint of empathy breaking through her usual skepticism. I hear you, Ricky, and maybe there's room for both approaches. For some, public recognition heals. For others, privacy preserves dignity. It's complicated. Ricky nods, a faint smile forming, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. Exactly. It's complicated, but that's life, isn't it? Death, grief, it's messy. And maybe we need to sit with that discomfort to understand one another. The camera pans across the audience once more, some faces wet with tears, some contemplative, all fully absorbed. The energy in the studio is heavy but charged with shared humanity. For a few moments, the debate feels less like a clash and more like a reflection of life itself. Joy leans back, shaking her head softly, smiling faintly. I don't think anyone here will forget this conversation anytime soon. Ricky nods, voice quiet now, almost intimate. And maybe that's the point. To talk, to share, to be seen. That's how we honor life and death and everything in between. The studio sits in a heavy, contemplative silence, the kind that leaves a mark, not just on those present, but on viewers at home. Everyone realizes they've witnessed something rare, a conversation that goes beyond debate and lands squarely in the heart.
The tension in the studio is palpable as the segment resumes after the pause. Denise and Whoopi glance at each other, both sensing that the emotional weight in the room has tipped towards something combustible. The audience is still buzzing from Ricky's heartfelt stories, whispers and soft gasps filling the air. Sunny Hostin sits upright, a flicker of frustration crossing her face. Ricky, I get your point, really, but sometimes it feels like you're turning grief into a performance. You talk about dignity and humanity, but what about those who don't want their grief observed, dissected, or commented on? Some things should remain private. Ricky leans forward, elbows on the table, his gaze steady and unwavering. It's not performance, Sunny. It's life. People sharing their loss, their love, their memories. It's real, it's raw, it's human. And yes, sometimes it's public, but that doesn't make it a show. It makes it meaningful. Sunny's eyes narrow, lips pressed together. Meaningful or social pressure disguised as healing?
People feel compelled now, on social media, in the public eye, to display grief they might not be ready to share. That's exploitation, Ricky. The studio goes quiet, the audience sensing the crescendo building. Ricky straightens, voice calm, but cutting through the tension like steel. It's not exploitation when it helps people breathe, when it saves someone from feeling invisible. You think privacy protects everyone, but sometimes being seen is the only thing that keeps you alive in the moment. Gasps ripple across the audience. Some clap loudly, others sit frozen, absorbed in the raw intensity of the exchange. Joy Behar leans forward, laughing nervously, trying to break the intensity. "Oh, come on, you two. We're all going to need therapy after this segment." A few laughs ripple through the audience, but the gravity remains. The clash has reached a peak where humor can only barely pierce the tension. Sunny takes a deep breath, her tone sharper now, slicing through the laughter. "Ricky, some people are not ready to be seen in their grief. You call it connection, I call it pressure. You're ignoring the fear, the hesitation, the dignity that comes from private mourning." Ricky leans in, voice low, measured yet forceful. "It's not about forcing anyone, Sunny. It's about reminding us that life ends, that grief exists, and that sharing, even publicly, can heal. That's all I'm saying. Some people need that acknowledgement. Some people don't. But pretending it doesn't exist, that's the real cruelty." The room goes silent for a heartbeat, the audience collectively holding her breath. Then a spattering of applause begins, hesitant at first, then growing as people process the weight of Ricky's words. Half the studio claps, some cheer, others nod quietly, visibly moved. Sunny's jaw tightens, but a flicker of respect crosses her eyes. She straightens, voice softer now. "I hear you, Ricky, I do. But my point remains. Privacy is a right. Public grief is a choice, never a requirement. That balance is everything." Ricky exhales slowly, his expression softening slightly, though the fire in his eyes remains. "I agree. Balance. Choice. No one should ever feel forced to display their grief. But let's not ignore the power in being seen, in connection, in shared mourning. That's all I'm asking for." The camera pans to Whoopi, who nods thoughtfully. "I think we just witnessed a lesson in humanity. Death, grief, privacy, public acknowledgement. It's messy, it's emotional, and it's real. And I think everyone here at home is feeling it too." The segment cuts to a commercial, leaving the studio in a charged, contemplative silence. The audience murmurs, some shaking their heads, some whispering to neighbors. Everyone knows the conversation isn't over in their minds. It will linger, challenge, and resonate long after the camera stopped rolling. Ricky leans back, a faint, almost imperceptible smile crossing his face. Sunny folds her hands, contemplative, eyes distant for a moment before returning to the table. The sparks have ignited fully on stage, and the stage is set for the final, emotional resolution in the outro. The commercial break ends, and the studio lights warm, softening the previously tense atmosphere. Ricky Gervais leans back in his chair, a faint smile tugging at his lips, while Sunny Hostin sits upright, thoughtful, her posture a mix of firmness and reflection. The audience settles, quiet but attentive, sensing that the final moments of this conversation will bring clarity, or at least understanding. Whoopi Goldberg leans forward, voice calm and deliberate. "Well, we've heard it all tonight. Grief, death, privacy, public acknowledgement. It's complicated, emotional, and deeply personal. But maybe that's exactly the point. There's no single way to experience loss. Ricky nods, his gaze sweeping across the panel and then the audience. Exactly. Public or private, grief doesn't have a rule book. It's messy, it's human, and the choice, how we honor those we've lost, that's what matters most. Sonny Hostin exhales softly, a subtle smile forming. I can admit that, Ricky. Perhaps I was too rigid in my insistence on privacy. Public acknowledgement can be powerful, meaningful, if it's genuine. Maybe peace and healing look different for everyone, and that's okay. Ricky leans slightly forward, voice warm. I think that's all anyone can ask for. Understanding, respect, space to grieve however it feels right. Some people find comfort in solitude, others in connection. Both are valid. Joy Behar, chuckling softly, adds, and for those of us watching, maybe it's a reminder to honor both, the private and the public, to recognize grief without judgment, however it's expressed. The audience bursts into applause. Some stand, clapping slowly, visibly moved. A few nod silently, wiping tears from their eyes, while others whispered to their neighbors about personal experiences that mirror what they just witnessed on stage. The energy is reflective, respectful, and oddly celebratory, a recognition of the humanity in what can often feel like taboo topics. Whoopi sums it up, leaning back in her chair with a smile. Maybe happiness or peace isn't about where we are or how we mourn, but about who's around when we face life's most difficult moments and how we choose to honor them. Ricky nods, voice gentle but earnest. Exactly. There's no shame in crying alone and no shame in seeking community. The important thing is that we feel, that we remember, and that we allow ourselves and others the space to do so. Sonny and Ricky share a brief, mutual nod, a silent acknowledgement of the tension that was and the understanding that now exists. It's a rare moment of vulnerability and respect on daytime television, leaving the panel and viewers alike with something to carry long after the cameras stop rolling. The audience applauds again, louder this time, as the camera slowly pans across faces, capturing expressions of empathy, reflection, and connection. The studio hums with a mix of awe and introspection. Whoopi's voice carries over the applause, soft but clear. What we witnessed today isn't just a debate about public or private grief. It's about life, love, loss, and how we choose to honor it. And maybe that's the lesson we all need to remember. The segment fades to the outro screen, teasing with Ricky Gervais' off-camera moments. What Ricky said backstage about his own mortality left everyone talking, and it's a conversation that isn't ending anytime soon. The screen fades to black, leaving the audience and viewers at home with lingering reflection, the sense that they just witnessed something profound, emotional, and unforgettable. If you enjoyed this, subscribe for more dramatic celebrity showdowns, emotional conversations, and moments you won't forget.